Startup and company here was really designed to help parents in this infant feeding journey and modernize the way we look at not only the infant nutrition system, but breast milk, and incorporating that into every infant nutrition journey. So we can go deeper into what this, how we started the company, but one of my goals here too is to chat with you guys about the behind the scenes of entrepreneurship. And we always talk about like the exciting goals and the accomplishments, but we also forget that there's a total other side to this that we don't talk about as much. So as we go through this, I just talking to you about my lessons and where we started, where we're going, and then hopefully inspire you to think about also possibly starting a company. So first here, I always love to talk about the connecting the dots. I always am in this journey looking at my past history saying, okay, how did I end up here? And if you kind of think about where I started at SDSW, I majored here in political science and political theory. A lot of really cool moments of debate, challenging different political thoughts and theories. But today, I'm in the infant nutrition business with food science. How did that happen, right? And then I put a couple notes here about just where my journey started and all the different types of ways where the dots didn't seem to connect in the moment, but when I do truly look back, it all gave me a moment to actually talk about building not only opportunities, but also qualities and experiences that led me to where I am today. So from being a sales associate at Nordstrom when I was in college, just doing everything I could to, continue to be in school, but also financially take care of myself. I was a lot in health and nutrition, so I started a company for myself, which was Fit with Trish, and helped me design a lot of how we look at essentially building other small companies. My husband started a business called Bananas. We are definitely a family of entrepreneurs here. And in that, I learned a lot about just food waste and how not only is that happening in just different fruits and veggies in the world, but also in breast milk. So the goal of here is to just really talk about in every different part of my life from a journey I was taking a leap, and I had no idea where it was going to lead to, and just learning through that to be able to say, okay, I built all these different qualities and experiences that led me to really trying to be the person to actually solve this other problem. And I always really like to, again, show this is there's so many times in our life where we think about we have to have this perfect journey, this certain major, this certain step, everything you need to go in order to get to that next step of where you want to be. But from my experience, it really doesn't have to be as linear as you think. And you can completely take advantage of different opportunities of your life, and it can still lead you in a place that you might not have expected, but you wouldn't be in any other way. So, just a little bit of me, my experience, background, and how we led to Leche. This one is really deep. I think as we were going through and thinking about modernizing breast milk and using the technology and systems to build what we built today, really when you peel back the layers of this and just entrepreneurship in general, you have to have a mission, right? And I think that that's something really, really critical to think about as you're thinking about designing a product, a service, a company, anything that you are going into that next stage to pretty much give your whole heart and soul into. You're gonna have different changes in your products and services. Everything is gonna adapt, but there needs to be a mission behind what you're doing. And so for my co-founder and I, when we were addressing and solving this problem, it was our personal problem. We were dealing with essentially way too much breast milk that was being wasted, and we couldn't share it with people in need. And we knew that in the end, this is something that we need to shift and bring back. Today is bringing back a generational practice. And then when we go deeper into, this data of everything being wasted, this is where our mission really drove deep into our hearts, is taking care of parents, giving them options, and taking care of our babies. And I think when you do that, no matter what kind of roller coaster you're going to be on in this entrepreneur journey, your mission is what fuels you in every step, every pivot, every different thing. So one of the things that was really critical to us as we were building this company is understanding just how much breast milk is wasted in the world, not only here in the US, but globally. And we all know breast milk is liquid gold in many ways, and we can have a whole conversation just about breast milk itself, but you guys, I'm sure, are very aware that this is something that not only helps our little premature babies, but even our full-term babies get to that next, first step of life and the best nutrition they can. So we were determined to use technology and science to essentially fill in this gap and help reduce the waste of breast milk. One of the other things I think that's really critical when you're going through, essentially, you've figured out your mission, right? You know what you want to do. Now it's identifying the problem. And this was a big thing for us that we realized is there was a ton of excess breast milk and it was being wasted, but why are we not actually taking this and using technology to be able to solve the problem? And this is where we came up with freeze drying. So what our company does a lot is we take breast milk and in its liquid form and we actually turn it into a powder. So now it's a shelf-stable product that you can actually use, not only preserve the nutrients for way longer than 6 months to a year, but you can actually use it in many more cases. So this is where we talked about, we know what the problem is, there's a ton of breast milk waste, but how do we solve it? Let's turn it into a powder, let's make it a lot more accessible for people to use, and then also share. And we can talk about the donation side that we went through as well. But this was really our moment to say, okay, here's the problem, and then here's the solution. Again, this just has a little bit about how much is wasted, and you can see not just on an individual level, but even on a medical level, and B2B. And then the path is not linear. This one always gets me really excited because one of the things I always tell people who are going through this journey of essentially entrepreneurship and thinking about solving a problem, coming up with a product and solution, what you think you might be solving for at the beginning usually doesn't end up being the final product that you end up creating, right? And the biggest thing I always tell people is when you have that idea, when you figured out what that problem is and you think you have the solution, just go. Start putting it out there in the world. And then go in and really start to analyze what are customers saying, what are people saying, what do they want? And so I think that was one thing that, as we were again, going through, finding the problem and the solution, now it's just executing and actually doing it. I think this is something that's really critical too that people miss when they're thinking about actually going through this entrepreneur journey. It's scary to start, right? You think it has to be perfect, and it doesn't. And I think it's a really, really critical step too to not only learn about what you're doing, but learn from the people that you are essentially trying to solve for. And so this is just a little bit of the path is not linear. You can come up with an idea, and then throughout that launch, you end up with what the product and what consumers want. And so when we did our beta launch and launch group, we essentially asked all of our customers, if we have this solution now, what kind of product and service do you want from that? And it led us to what we have more of today. And there's a solution. So one of the things that we noticed very quickly when we were going through this was people want the ability to essentially have a personalized formula. So this is kind of where we adapted a lot more of our everyday Leche that gives people a package of, think about more like a whey protein or a formula if you have kids, it allows you to go in there. And then also the sachets that give them a lot more flexibility on the go, putting in their diaper bag and so forth. So that's a solution, and I'll kind of guide you through how it led to the next stage of the business. So when we first started our company, we were really solving for personal individual use. We were moms who had a lot of excess breast milk, and we're looking for ways to preserve it ourselves. And so we had a service where mothers were able to come, send us their breast milk. We tested it, made sure it was safe, freeze-dried it into a powder, and sent it back to them. And a lot of parents were super excited and still are. This is a way for them to essentially preserve all of their own hard work. But what we realized through this was there's an entire industry in breast milk that we were unaware of. And I always tell people that when we first tiptoed in the breast milk industry with our own, and then we fully dove, whoa, this is way bigger than you think. And we learned a lot from what was happening on the B2B side and the medical side. So in the breast milk industry specifically, it's concentrated on our hospital network. So it's really focused on our NICU babies and taking donated milk you have a lot of excess donated milk, processing it and being able to turn it into a safe product that our NICU babies, our premature immune compromised babies can have. And it's an amazing resource. It's been about 20, 25 years. Even UCSD has their own milk bank. It's super, super cool to see how we're not only taking this excess breast milk, but giving it to babies in need. But throughout that research, we also knew or found out that there was so much supply. And I think that goes back to what I was saying on the previous slide was right around 40% of all breast milk is wasted and lost in the world. And you're talking billions of ounces. Why are we also not being able to provide that to other people who might not be NICU babies, but full-term babies that need access to breast milk and don't have it? And so this is where I always am, saying is you start with a product and a solution, but never be blind to the opportunities ahead of you. Because you could think that you might have a solved solution. Don't ever think that it's the only way. There's so many other opportunities out there. And this is really what led us to this next stage of the company that we have really grown to over the last year and a half, was really taking that waste and turning it into a product that now not only moms themselves have, but people who don't have access to breast milk are able to have. So this was kind of the connection. And the big theme here that I always like to talk about is we were unaware of this side, but as we had the solution and we knew the problem, our goal was again to create more options for parents. So never be blind to the opportunities. I think it's really, really important to always kind of keep your eyes open. And it can help you develop as you look at different parts of your company. Now, this is kind of more on the outside, I call it behind the curtain component of entrepreneurship. And I think it is really important to talk about because one thing in our journey that we have realized is it is not linear. There are a roller coaster of emotions, highs and lows. Anybody who is here and been on that journey knows. But I think one thing that's really, really critical, and I always tell people you can take one thing away from me on any of these talks, is how important your mission and your team is. Because in the end, especially during the lows, it's the people right next to you that are really going to make the difference of how you look at the next stage of this company. And so, for me, I always tell people the most important decision you'll ever make in your entire life is your life partner. Hands down. Best decision I made over there. Second, and it's, biggest fan. But second is your business partner. And I really, really want to emphasize how important that is because this is your ride or die in many ways. And you will very quickly learn how important that is with your team. And so when you're thinking about building a company, when you're really thinking about that mission, think also about the people because it is such a critical component. You can have highs of the sales and customer acquisition costs going down, you name it. But in the end, this is your most important component of business, in my opinion. So never ever let that push to the side. It is as important as anything else you're building. Imposter syndrome. So I think this kind of goes back a little bit to my beginning, right, of connecting the dots. If you actually look at a lot of my background, I would be the first person to stand up in this room and say, why me? Why am I the person to come up here and try and solve a global issue of breast milk waste? I don't have the background that a lot of people believe is there, but I have the passion and I'm the number one person willing to learn and use that other experience to develop something else. And I think this is a critical component to not only a lot of different entrepreneurs, but just in the entire system is you think that you have to have a certain background to go solve a problem. And I can tell you right now, that's not the case. And I learned a ton through this process of you don't have to be the expert, but always be willing to listen to the experts and bring them on, right? Back to the team component. Bring them onto your team. And I'll never forget when we had our first kind of small fundraise that I sent it out, to a bunch of people that I thought were interested, and I got a phone call, and our first investor picked it up, said, I'm in, I'll take the whole round, under one condition. You're running it. And I was like, I was going to go hire a bunch of experts and go do this. I'm not the one to do this. No, I'll take the whole round, but you're running it. And it was that moment that I really thought about And I didn't know it in the moment, but I was scared actually when he told me. I was like, I'm gonna take this check. But I'm also a little nervous to be the one leading this. But it was after, a couple of years going through this, I realized when you are an outsider, when you sit back and you look at problems differently, you have a huge advantage because you're not stuck into a lot of different things that people told you are the experts. So the reason I tell that story is there are going to be people around you that are going to support you, but also find the people around you that are going to challenge you and believe in you, because you definitely can be the person to actually solve that. And don't let imposter syndrome ever stop you from essentially creating something really cool and being the one to challenge the status quo. Everybody knows this. The ride's a roller coaster. The low points, they're there to teach you something. And I think that is a really, really critical part that I've learned throughout my own journey is every entrepreneur journey is different, but the ones who truly make it are the ones who hit the lows and do not quit. That is the best thing I can tell you, is like when you have that strong mission, when you have that team, when you are just in it, no matter how low that low gets, you will continue to fight. And you have to also be able to pivot. I think that's a really critical thing too, to just be able to say, okay, this ride is shifting in a different way, and you gotta be able to pivot and adapt to it. And again, leaning on your team, finding what your true mission is gonna allow you to really ride that roller coaster and hold on tight. Because again, high highs, low lows. Another thing too is, grit. I know a lot of people talk about this, but it really is a common thing I've seen is you gotta have the grit. You gotta be able to push through it. But it's so worth it. And I think if you do have that deeper mission, you're gonna be able to push through all those highs and lows. And then the biggest thing here that I always like to kind of chat through, we can have questions. If you guys have any questions, this is our time to do that. But I think here it's, when we started this company, we did it out of our own need and really wanted to solve a problem that we had. And I think that's something really critical to always say or emphasize is this is a problem usually a lot of other people have. So when you are truly coming to establish companies, do a startup, and you feel like maybe I'm the only one that has this, like no, this is something that a lot of other people have. And go ahead, take a shot, like execute. I think that's one thing that Jenny and I, my co-founder, have learned in this stage of just like finding ideas and going through this is just execute. Like don't think twice, go out, give it a shot, and see what you can do with it. And I think it's really powerful to be able to do that, and no matter what kind of challenge comes your way, it's worth it, right? So that's a little bit about who we are, Leche, and just our story. If you guys have any questions, that's it.
Definitely. So you talked about your co-founder. I know just from your talk before that it's someone that you knew. I mean, how did you consider other options, and then how have you grown your team? Because finding those next team members can be equally difficult. And have you divorced from any of your team members?
Yeah, I think, well, not my co-founder, she's the best. We came at this with, again, our own problem, and she has a background a lot in brand, biz dev, marketing, and then I have a lot more of the operations, food science. So it was just a really great team when it came to just the execution of the company, and then also passion, right? Mission driven. And we both just had a lot of milk and we wanted to share and donate it to people in need. Outside of that, yes, I would say that, our biggest goal after every challenge that we've had is hire the best. Hire the people that are the experts in different components. So one of the things that we have learned over this past, journey that we've been on is how critical it is to essentially vertically integrate a lot of your business. And I think we're seeing that a lot in just AI and other components happening today in the 0 to 1 transition we're all in. But people are critical, right? I talked about that. And when you realize too that people are just maybe not as focused on that mission or that passion, and they're not willing to go down that crazy roller coaster, pull the people on it that are going to, because it's not easy. And I think that one of the things that Jenny and I have always focused on is making sure that we get the people who are the experts. And so one of the things that's developed in the last couple of years, as I mentioned, vertically integrating. So now we do all of our own manufacturing. We have all of our own tech system for onboarding donors who have excess breast milk. And one of the key components to all of that is being able to essentially take the data that we know on different parts outside of just the product and using that to grow the business. So this is like all these steps, and then with that said is hiring the people internally that say, hey, I'm here for the long haul. I want to help build this, entire company from the ground up, and then really lean into them and appreciate them. So yeah, we've said we're very big, open arms kind of people, and want again people who come into our mission as well. But at the same time, if that's not where they want to be, we also want to continue to bring the other people in. So we've got a pretty strong team now, and we're really excited about it. So yeah.
Did you have a follow-up?
Just follow on their roles between the co-founders. That's the only thing I was going to ask.
Yeah, so for the two roles, Jenny is really focused on biz dev. Everything you see when it comes to branding, marketing, partnerships, everything, that's her. She is an expert in so many ways. And then I get to come in a lot more on the back end when it comes to food science, manufacturing, operations, everything. We get to come together in all of that, which is really a really strong partnership, because both of those are really critical to this business, especially when you talk about our community aspect of the business, which is really our donors who have excess breast milk, and we compensate them for all of that excess breast milk for that. So it's just really enhancing all those partnerships that she does, and then I get to work with a lot of the back end fun operation stuff.
Yeah, you talked about mission being kind of critical, right? How do you stay aligned with your mission? Like, do you have any, like, just your own personal tools or techniques, or with your partners to, like, not get, when we're trying to get pulled in 1,000 different directions, like, how do you stay aligned and be like, nope, this is what we're doing?
We do that weekly, if not daily. Anytime we're in a situation, and Jenny and I specifically are making a big decision for the company, and you're torn in different ways because you see a lot of positives on one aspect, but again, it goes back to, okay, those can be exciting. Is this getting us to our mission? And I think that's always something that we constantly ask ourselves when we're going through, are we getting to a position that we are essentially upcycling all this breast milk and giving every baby access to it globally? This is where that big, vision component comes in, and where that mission is. And if it doesn't feel like it's getting us there, then we're ready to pivot, right? And talk and say, okay, well, what new decision or what act can we do that gets us closer to there? Because a lot of times you guys will realize, especially when you have investors coming in or other people that are looking at this business very differently, is how do we grow it, how do we scale it? That's very beneficial, but also how do we ensure that we can stay true to our mission? Because if we don't, then all of that, it doesn't fill our cup in a way, right? So it's really balancing a lot of that, but we do it on a daily basis, especially when it comes to big decisions and people specifically. I'm not sure how many people here are founders or gone through the investment side, but that is another critical component when you are really starting a business. Checks are exciting, especially now. There's like a huge emphasis with AI. There's so much money flowing into like innovation, etc. Make sure it's the person writing the check that you really, really dig into, because it can really shift the way you're looking at that next stage of the business. And I think that's like, it goes back, do they have the mission? Are they passionate about this? Are they looking at different things differently? And then internally doing that as a team as well.
From an operations perspective, from the operations perspective, what was the most challenging thing you ran into growing your business?
Operations in our business, let me tell you, it is nuts. So not only do we have a whole vertical integration from onboarding our donors and onboarding customers, we have an entire manufacturing side. And if you could think about the importance of safety with breast milk and how you do that, plus logistics, there's reasons why a lot of people haven't conquered this problem, right? Is because it's a lot. And I think though, again, when you have that passion, you have that grit, you are just willing to continue to push through it. But I would say back to, as you go through all these different challenges, and this is what led us to really thinking about vertically integrating every single component to this business, because how important logistics are, as well as operations, even manufacturing, we had to own that. We had to own it. Otherwise, when you're relying on other people, co-manufacturing, external labs, all these testing components, it becomes even more of a nightmare. So this was over the last couple, I would say 18 months or so, the biggest component we focused on was, if we're gonna do this right, we have to own everything from start to finish. And this is gonna allow us to not only think about, upcycling all that breast milk, but when you think about breast milk innovation as not just an infant nutrition source, but deeper beyond that, it's more about us having that data internally in-house. And luckily, timing is a critical thing, but with everything happening on the tech side, AI, all this stuff, it's allowing us to really even benefit more from pulling it all in-house. But it's locked, guys. The logistics are insane. We have shipping overnight. I mean, you name it, right? But leave it to moms. They're going to find a way to figure it out.
Yeah, I was going to ask how you're looking at AI and how that's shaping your business strategy.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, it's I'm sure you guys know it's happening so fast that you feel like you're always like constantly catching up. But for us, it's implementing a lot of the different techniques that we're seeing on other components of business. Data collection is a huge one, and just implementing this into every different step. But we're still, from even the operations, the manufacturing side, we're pulling in a lot of different AI technologies to kind of integrate into that so we can start gathering more data and learning even deeper, not just about our donors, our community, but our product itself. So as I mentioned, like breast milk, we can have a whole conversation on just that as a nutrition source. But when we think about upcycling all this and looking deeper into how we take this to the next level and as a superfood, all of the technology on AI and so forth is helping us gather that data quicker. Yeah.
Where is your manufacturing located?
It's in Arizona. Yep.
And the reason for that?
There's a couple of reasons. So we originally were in the Pacific Northwest in Oregon. We just switched and sent down to Arizona. We have a lot of intricacy or similarities between the dairy industry, which I'm sure you're familiar with, as well as new femtech and stuff happening. Arizona actually is a really incredible hub right now of innovation and manufacturing. I'm sure you guys probably know, like the chips, a lot of things is happening there in Phoenix. Having the connection to dairy industry, processing, and all these other femtech organizations that are coming there, it was a great place for us to really set that foundation there as we continue to grow. But there was a lot of different reasons for us to move there, but most of it came from all the growth happening on femtech, manufacturing, as well as the dairy industry. Yeah.
You mentioned the roller coaster of ups and downs and things like that. What major pivots or decision points in the early days just really changed the trajectory of the company? I mean, could you share one of those?
Yeah,
the
no,
stories
happy to.
behind it and the strive for the conflict or the alignment with your partner on how those decisions got made?
Yeah, I think it goes back to my whole kind of thought process of the team and people. So as we were going in and kind of diving into this breast milk industry, we were leaning on people that were experts. So as mentioned, especially in the hospital space, the B2B space, we were learning and watching about everything happening. How do we take breast milk and make it safe? And we do it for our NICU babies, our most immune compromised. So let's lean on a lot of these people that have been doing this and focusing on it on this medical side, as well as adapting that to the consumer side. So as we were going through that, Jenny and I are very open people, and because we have a strong mission, we're very come in and join us and let's build something together. But I think one of the things that is a critical lesson on that is you still also have to keep your barriers up, because a lot of people will want to see success but have it adapt to them as well. And so in the best way to say this is as you go through learning, as you go through experience, make sure that you're also, again, picking the right people, because not everything is just roses and fun and beautiful. It's tough, and a lot of times, I think too, people think that because you might not have had the 20, 25 years of experience, that you don't know the answer. But also, they don't realize too that you are the customer, you're the mom, you're the person dealing with a lot of these problems. So the way you look at different perspectives is really critical as well. But I think those were some of the hard lessons that we learned was opening up the arms and bringing people in and realizing we also have to kind of close those doors here and there as well. Yeah. Any other
Hog all the
questions?
questions. Okay.
It definitely piggybacks off of his question. So at what point, because you mentioned that like you didn't need to be the expert before you start, at what point do you decide that this is not a thing that you want to become an expert in and learn along the way, but you want to delegate that to somebody else instead?
Yeah, great question. I think that for us, I've never been one to need to be the person that has all the answers in the room. I actually really like, it fills my cup and I get fired up knowing the people that have spent 8, 10, 15 years on a focus like area expertise. And the goal for us was how can we bring those people into our mission as opposed to trying to continue to like become that person. So I think there's a quote, and I'll probably botch it right now, but talking about, you know, when you're learning tennis, you can go out and just keep hitting the ball, you know, or you can ask Serena Williams to come teach you, and two of those, one's gonna take a lot longer than the other one. So it's one of those things I think too, is like when you have a passion and mission, you're ready to go, you know, you can make the decision of saying, yes, I'll take 5 to 10 years to figure out how to be the expert, or I can go find those experts and bring them on, and then we can do this together. And I think that's something that's been really, you know, deep in our hearts, is we have never wanted to do this alone. We really want to do this with the right people. So bring them on, like, and we're not scared of that, right, personally. And I think it's a critical component I think it's also Ford, right, talked about this when he was building cars back in the day. It's like, I was never the expert in the room, but I brought all the people in there. So I think on top of that, there's always room to learn, and that's where I get really excited. Anyways, I can continue to learn from people, but I get more jazzed up by bringing people who are smarter than me in the room.
How did you start with manufacturing and then scaling manufacturing? Because I don't think either you or your co-founder really had that direct experience, and that's a beast. Right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. This was when I was working really closely with our co-manufacturing. We were doing our initial product. I learned a lot about just how this entire system, and then on top of that too, outside of our co-manufacturing, there's 36 milk banks in the U.S. right that independently collect donor milk and then be able to give it, provide it to hospitals and NICUs. So learning essentially all of those systems and then hiring the people who have had expertise in that. So one of the big advisors we have on has opened up a ton of dairy manufacturing facilities and gone through that, because there are a lot of similarities that we have on the breast milk side as well as the dairy industry, and then learning from that and then going deeper. So again, one of these things that's exciting is people have their systems, right, that they use in manufacturing. But since you're the outsider, you're like, well, why aren't we trying this? Why aren't we doing this? So we have a lot of really cool proprietary technology happening on even just the processing side. We know it's been working in the past 20, 25 years, but there's so many other cool things that have happened, and we're pulling that in to adapt that even to breast milk itself. So it's, just kind of, well, this is how it's done, and this is great, but what about this? And I think that goes kind of back to the imposter syndrome side, is when you aren't just in it fully every single day, you're able to look at other things and kind of go, whoa, we can try this, let's do this, and see what happens, So I think that's a benefit too, is hiring those people. But that was a big lesson, is from going into the manufacturing, learning from co-manufacturers, and then also how other independent milk banks were doing this, and how can we do it better and bring on the right people to do that.
So we have time for one more question. I know I've been hogging, but I am so intrigued with this journey because it's so challenging what you took on, and so brave to take on all those challenges with you and your co-founder.
Thank you.
And the success that you've had.
Yeah. It's worth it, guys. Moms and parents and babies deserve it. So I think that's what drives our mission, is to really help the people in need for that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not Brian had it.
Throughout the day, we've talked about funding as well in terms of tying it to milestones, and you've spoken a lot about bringing in the right experts and kind of scaling your business. You're in a field that, like you've mentioned, it sounds like extremely highly regulated, it's high manufacturing. Can you speak a bit about what those milestones were for for you, and how do you even like kick this off, you and your partner? What does that look like between when you got significant funding to be able to perhaps afford those experts or afford those processes and then consultants? Because that can be so daunting just to think, where do you begin and where do those milestones tied to funding help you actually launch and scale?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. So one of the things that Jenny and I, and I'll be fully transparent, that most of this business has been completely bootstrapped, her and I figuring it out. And then it was, going through, and when you find the right people, you aren't focused on the money component. And I think that's a critical thing to really think about when you are, again, building that team, is that they're coming to you saying, I'm the expert, I want this, here's what I want. But usually they're not back to that whole point of the mission and the passion and the grit. So what we really focused on and said was really hire slow, right? Or get your advisors in your team slow. You want people on there that are saying, I want to be a part of this. I'm not looking at what this is going to be on the financial side. I know that there's a huge potential there, but I'm passionate about the mission. And when you find those people, again, when you hit those lows, that's what's going to be driving them, not the other component. So I think for us, being very bootstrappy, being very focused on the people and the mission and driving that has allowed us to really look at those next stages and say, okay, we know we have to conquer these and get these right people and systems in place. And if we have the right people, we're going to be able to then take that and say, here's the financial side of how we look at funding this business, right? But we always switched first to people and then to the funding. And I think sometimes people get that a little bit twisted in many ways. Let's get all the funding, let's figure this out, and then we'll answer that part after. And I would challenge a lot of people to actually try doing the opposite, because you would be shocked at how much you can do if you are focused more on that as opposed to just getting all the funds in and then figuring it out. And so I think that, I don't know if that answers fully your question, but it was a big component to us, as if we can map out what our needs are and have the right people there, we're going to know exactly the kind of funding that we need, and the people that can get us to meet those milestones and those metrics.
All right, well, big thank you.